Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi again, everybody. It's Ken Calvert alongside Father Joe Grimaldi, and we would like to welcome you to the Father Joe Grimaldi Podcast. The Father Joe Grimaldi Podcast, proudly supported by our good friends at Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln. The Lincoln Summer Invitation Sales event is in its final days. That means right now is the best time to purchase or lease any one of the exciting Lincoln vehicles. Do you realize it's already time to start thinking about the all-new 2020 lineup that's coming in? Yeah, that means it's just a matter of weeks before our inventory lot will be overflowing, and we need to make our best deals to free up that space. That's right, the Lincoln MKC, the Nautilus, the Navigator, the Aviator, Continental, MKZ, they are all priced to move and move now. Stop by Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile and Telegraph in Southfield. Mention you heard about it on the Father Joe podcast, and you'll get extra savings, additional savings, oh yeah. Shop online at starlincoln.com. That's starlincoln.com, and tell them Father Joe sent you. Today, one of those topics that you know a lot about. Well, not a ton.
Not necessarily, yeah.
Not a ton, but you know more than I do because I haven't done it, and I need to do it. And so now people are saying, okay, what is it you need to do? I have not made pre-planned funeral arrangements. So I have a couple of questions that I've written down. Do you mind if I refer to my notes today, sir?
Not at all.
Father Joe Grimaldi, when should I look into pre-planning my funeral arrangements?
Let me put it this way, though. Mm-hmm. You are certainly not alone in not having prepared.
I had a feeling.
And I really don't know. I think certain things are definitely necessary, especially if you have certain wants and desires that are going to be particular. There's some people don't care. Okay, they just figure when I go, somebody will take care of it. They'll pick out the readings of Scripture. They'll pick out the hymns that are going to be sung. They'll pick out what are we going to do afterwards and where will we have a little reception and so on. But then most people, if they sit down and think about it, they do care about who's going to do the readings. They should be asked while they're alive, would you be able to do a reading on the day of my funeral? Whether it's necessary, I don't know. The thing is this, that if you are particular about that kind of thing, you should ask. Also, sitting down, writing down maybe 5 or 6 different hymns that you like particularly. Actually, one of the things that brings to mind is this, and we discussed this once before, they make out their will for their living will, okay? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that is asked on that document is there a kind of music that you would like while you are being given the morphine or while they're keeping you calm and so on? So people actually write down what kind of music they would like in the background while they're in their last hours, their last day, if you want. So it's interesting. Now, for a funeral, it's a little bit different.
Wait, I got to stop you. Go ahead, and we'll get back to it.
No, you better.
So... Boy, you're basically telling Kenny boy, Ken, you're about to go to the other side. You want to listen to the Rolling Stones?
Well,
I'm saying that seriously. I mean, if I'm a big fan of a group or whatever it is, maybe I want to recollection, if you will, of my great days in radio. And maybe I have a sense of humor about the whole thing. So, sure, am I still in a place where I'm capable of making that decision? No, but I've written it down.
Okay, all I want to say is this, that some people are.
Okay.
I mean, they're being given...
Should it be religious in nature? Okay.
No, it's something that should keep you peaceful.
Okay.
And basically, if there is something you like, you can ask for that. There's nothing that says you can't.
Church won't deny me
listening to something. No.
Okay.
And of course, some people do know, some people don't know, but they know ahead of time that that's what they would like to listen to while they're in their last hours.
In hospice care, let's say, right?
Hospice care, but
sure.
Not everybody does it. It's not a requirement. It's not something I'm recommending, but it is done, and some people actually like the idea that they can choose either a meditative hymn or something by the Rolling Stones, whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
But they can choose that for listening. But this is quite different. Preparing for a funeral is different than the last moments of life.
I think that's really important, so continue.
Yeah. Preparing for the funeral, then, like to think about the 5 or 6 hymns that you can, and this brings another thing to mind. Years ago, this was not here, it was in Honolulu, where this person who was a terrific writer for the local newspaper, and he wrote the sports page, particularly baseball. And so he came in to see me one day because he wanted to prepare his funeral, and he didn't know when it was going to be. It turned out that he was a year away from it. So he said, one of the things I would like to have done is, as the recessional's being played and we're leaving the church, take me out to the ball game.
Cool. That's awesome.
Now, we were able to honor that. I mean, it's not a religious hymn by any means, but we had the religious hymns in place, and it was an addition to the religious hymns. But anyway, take me out to the ball game.
Sure.
And that's what he wanted played, and we did it. But that was done, as they say, a year ahead of his funeral, and he didn't know when it was going to be. So, to prepare for your funeral, I don't think most people do it. It's a nice thing to do because then the church has all the information ready. Who's going to bring up the gifts? Who's going to do the prayer of the faithful? Who will do the first reading, the second reading? Is there going to be a eulogy? Oh, I don't want a eulogy. Yes, I do want a eulogy. And all of this other stuff. It's great to have that stuff done ahead of time because your survivors then don't have to fight over, no, I know he wanted a eulogy. What do you mean he doesn't want a eulogy? And so on and on and on and on. When is the eulogy going to be given? The best time for it to be given, I think, is during the reception afterwards. People are gathered and they're remembering anecdotes and they're remembering little things, their conversations they had with the deceased. And that's a good time to remind the people of all the things that that individual did in his life. So that's what a eulogy is. Someone who loved his family, someone who worked hard to make a good living for his family, someone who enjoyed skiing, someone who enjoyed whatever it is. And they mention all of these things. And at the lunchtime, I call it the lunchtime, but you know what I mean,
right.
The reception afterwards, it's a good time to hear those things, and you'll have the people's attentions and so on. Nowadays, some people like it before the Mass begins, but again, you're under restriction because you only have a few minutes. But at a luncheon, you can do it when you want, and people are interested in that kind of stuff. So I just mentioned a few things that people... Here's what I do, okay. As a priest, when we learn of someone's death and they want to be buried at the church where I am, and they've asked me to preside, I call the whole family in, as many as can come. And we meet about 3 or 4 days ahead of time, and we sit down, say a little prayer for the deceased and for the family, and then I'll go around and ask each one individually who's present, in 1, 2, 3, 5 words, give me a description of Jack. And they each give their own idea. So you get an idea of who Jack is. Okay? Was he a practicing Catholic or wasn't he? Not that you're going to write this up, but it's good in the way you form your message. And so, and I said to them, I'm open to whatever the answer is. It doesn't matter. Be nice if he were a practicing Catholic, but just was he or wasn't he? because that'll be, it's nothing worse than having the preacher get up there and say, oh, well, he loved the rosary and he said it every day and he didn't even know what the rosary was, okay?
Right.
And people know that.
Right.
So you want to be able to know what you're saying instead of just getting up there and making things up. So, and where did he live? What did he do? What were his recreational outlets? Did he travel? And so on.
Yeah. I just had a very, very good friend of mine die suddenly, Fred McLeod.
Oh, I was going to ask you about him.
Freddie and I, we worked together, called him Sports Grunt. He was part of our team at WRIF in the late 80s and 90s, and went on to be the television voice of the Detroit Pistons when I was doing the Detroit Pistons game or games. And I got to tell you, the punch in the gut was unlike...
Same age, isn't he?
He's a little younger, 67.
Oh, wow.
And a workout fanatic. And Freddie, the last person I would have thought, just recently, 3 weeks ago, was doing the Lions broadcasts with Chris Spielman, and I just happened to turn the corner, and I heard a sports update, and I said, we're all grieving the loss of 67-year-old sportscaster Fred McLeod. And I just almost had to pull over. I went, what? I hope it wasn't catastrophic, and it wasn't. He died of a heart attack. So for some reason, that may have prompted this idea, because I know that his beautiful wife, Beth, who does a lot of television here locally in Detroit, and his kids, and especially the Cleveland Cavaliers, where he was the play-by-play announcer. When you said, take me out to the ball game, that's what Freddie would have loved to have had. He has 3 children, a beautiful wife, and totally shocked. Everybody's shocked. Freddie and his family probably didn't do what we're talking about right now, and that is making a pre-planned funeral arrangement. And I'm sure that right now, given the grief and the surprise, it's probably the hardest thing to have to do.
Very difficult for the family to do that.
It would be great to have in a safe, in a place where you could pull that out and just hand it to the funeral director, give us a little time to breathe, and it says here, if Father Grimaldi is available. Those are the sorts of things that people have to be prepared for.
Sure.
It's not necessarily going to be the hospice care. It could be something as simple as a massive stroke or heart attack.
Exactly.
So what do you recommend then? Should you be included, Father Grimaldi, in my pre-planning?
Well, whoever you would like to have as the presider at the funeral, you might say what you just said, if so-and-so is available.
I sure hope you're not, because if that's the case, you outlived me, you son of a pup.
Well, we're not talking about me, but anyway, you might want to put down the name of the presider if he's available. As you say, you said it very clearly, I think, to have all of that written form makes it so much easier for the family. It's related in a way to the preparing for the end of life. We discussed the end of life issues.
People don't want to do that.
They don't. They put it aside.
They don't want to face it.
But more and more, whenever you have health needs, going to the hospital or whatever, they always ask you, do you have your living will?
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, they do.
But people still neglect it. So if they're neglecting that, they're probably going to neglect the funeral itself. Nobody wants to talk about the funeral. And yet, it's not as horrible a subject as you might think. I mean, you're picking out nice hymns. You're picking out good readings that relate to what your thinking is about. You're picking out the Prayer of the Faithful so it doesn't sound like it's some stranger you've never heard about. So I think it's a helpful thing to have it all written down. If you were to go to any Catholic church, I'm sure they would lend you a copy of the hymnal so you could go through the hymns and pick out the ones you want as a processional, as a recessional, as a meditative, during communion, and so on, all of the different variables.
If I wanted Alleluia on my way out, Could I get Alleluia on my way out?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I
So-
just didn't know if there were restrictions to certain
There are
songs.
restrictions,
Okay.
but something like Alleluia is based on
Yeah.
religion. It's
Such
not,
a beautiful song.
It's based on religion. It's not,
We both had a dear friend who passed away years ago, and at the very ending there was a pause and then Hey Jude by the Beatles.
Yes.
And it was just perfect.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect.
Particularly since they refer to that person as Jude.
Yep. I
during
want to
her
remind
lifetime.
people, by the way, that I just did a quick search on this. The average cost of a funeral is with cremation. Okay, with cremation, that foregoes the casket and the actually putting the person into the ground. Average is about $7,000.
Sure.
Okay, so you've got to also realize that you are going to be hit with a very, very hard hit in terms of, may not be a lot to some people, but to other people, that's very large.
Very large, yeah.
And if it's sudden, that's going to be tough. That's why so many people do the GoFundMe pages for that.
Or they prepare. And it's interesting you mentioned cremation because the church is not opposed to cremation as
right.
long as it takes place after the funeral mass.
Right.
Now, they are still not opposed to having cremains, as they call them, during the mass, but the preference strongly is the body should be present.
Yeah.
And then cremation takes place. Now, you bring across the idea of a casket. Well, the person's still going to be in a casket, but it's not going to be as fancy or as nice as the one they might choose for the permanent casket, because it's going to be something that the person will eventually be cremated in. That's another thing to consider, because that's going to be a temporary thing, but it'll be still a cost.
A lot of Catholics still like to go into the ground, and if
Yes.
they do, if they want to be embalmed and then be put in a casket in the ground, circa 1980, as it was, within the past 20 years, I believe. How long has cremation been acceptable in the Catholic Church now?
I'm going to say about 20 years.
Okay, that's what I'm going to go with that as well.
Even with that, even though it's acceptable, I would say it's pretty equal now, half and half.
Oh, I definitely think so.
Yeah, at least.
I would
because-
say, and I think that trend line is going to go up further and further in
Yeah.
terms of cremation. I think more and more people are going to
See,
go
the
that
other
route.
reason why they like cremation nowadays is when people are scattered around the country.
Oh, we're going to get to scattered, by the way, and I'm glad you reminded me of that. I
That
don't know
other
the
thing, but-
family's scattered, but
Yeah.
we all know, well, we'll just say it right now. Don't scatter the ashes,
No,
friends.
no,
Don't
no.
do that. Okay, go ahead.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? I think why is because you want a central place where you can know that your loved one is,
Residing
yeah.
in a special place.
So you want to be able to go visit eventually. You
I-
might forget about that at the beginning and say, I'll scatter the ashes over the ocean and all of this. But basically, no, what I'm getting at is with people living so many different places, when you have cremains, people can hold on to them for a week or 2 or 3 and 4 and then have a funeral. As a matter of fact, here we are. Let me see.
That's
with-
that's very curious.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have a funeral already set up for October 15th.
No kidding.
Yeah. See, now
Explain.
in Hawaii, they didn't do the cremation until about 20 years ago as much. Well, because there's a great influence from people from the East. And so that the Chinese and the Japanese, they were doing that already. But in Hawaii, because the islands are separated by water, obviously, if they're islands, but usually if they died in Honolulu, you would wait for people to come visit. In the old days, they came by boat. That took a long time. And so in Hawaii, funerals don't take place for at least a week or 2 after the person dies. So it's not an immediate thing anyway.
Okay, my curiosity is piqued. Why October 15th?
They chose that. I don't know.
So the person has already passed.
Oh, that's why I say it's funny, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, you thought, no, this was not...
No.
It was not part of the pre-planning.
No. I understood that. It was the perfect time to get everybody together for...
That's what they thought. That's why it was being the people scattered everywhere.
So that's doable. That's doable with cremation.
It is. But again, it's not something the people like the church likes to see, okay? Mm-hmm. The other thing, too, I find... By the time the funeral happens, we forgot the person who died.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
So why not take advantage of the church's 2,000-year-old wisdom and say, well, it should take place within an appropriate time. Okay.
All right. A couple of really quick questions. Are really tough funerals for you to do? Military and first responders, those have to be unusually sad and difficult for the priest. Not necessarily because you haven't done funerals for some 30 years, but because of the fact that usually the people in the pews they're devastated. They're very sad.
Yes and no.
Okay.
That's a strange answer, but here's what I'm saying, is what I'm thinking anyway. There is an appropriate waiting period before the funeral takes place. And because there are days that go by, people are used to the idea already. If, for example, the person dies today and you do the funeral tomorrow morning, well, of course, it's going to be a very emotional day. However, usually there's about a week that goes by, at least 3 or 4 days go by before we actually do the funeral.
Yes.
By that time, people have accepted what has happened. Mm-hmm. They're used to it, and so they're ready to celebrate the person's life as opposed to concentrating on his death. And I think that's something that's, I try to remind people that's what the funeral is. You're celebrating that person's life, the interaction that you have with him or her while they're here on earth. You don't want to celebrate the death itself. So, you know what I mean? You're celebrating the life.
Yep.
So, yes, it's sad. There's no question. And, you know, it really doesn't matter, to me anyway, if it's a policeman or the tailor down the corner, okay? They're human beings. Human beings affect the family if they love them. And so the death is a separation that causes emotional hurt. Mm-hmm. And so it's, yes, there's more fanfare when it is, someone who died overseas defending the country, much more than, let's say, the tailor down the street who just died. I think it still is hurtful for the family, and so that you want to go out to them as much as you can. So it's difficult for me, whether it's one or the other.
Even you, though, will be impressed by the fact that the fire trucks with the double salute and the huge, huge flag, not to mention usually if it's a police officer or a firefighter, you'll have the bagpipes and a lot of things that tend to want to bring a tear to one's eye.
I didn't say I wouldn't be impressed. I certainly would be impressed. However, the family's pain is the same.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you want to be able to help them. That's why.
All right. Well, listen, it's something people normally don't want to talk about. But in summary, if you're listening to this podcast, at least wiggle it around a little bit in the old noggin there. Think about discussing it with your family. Think about everything Father Joe said. That starts with the actual costs. There's number one. Do it while you're lucid, while the family can be involved. Think about the readings, and think about things like cremation versus going into the ground. Either way, you're going somewhere, but you should remain intact someplace where the family can visit. And just be advised that it's something no one wants to talk about, but you have to talk about it.
I'm going to add one other thing that we don't have to discuss at length. Another thing people don't like to talk about is a will.
That's a really good point.
It's related in a way because A living will is very important. A regular will is also very important, but people don't like to talk about those things because it says the end of life. Well, it is.
Yeah, and it's usually a very stoic person on the other side going, okay, who gets the cars?
Yes, yes.
How much money you want to leave young Dexter over there? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Nobody wants to sit there for 2.5 hours.
No.
Why, somebody just who doesn't necessarily care, just wants to get it correct. Well, I think we got a lot of this one correct because I got the guy on the other side that can nail it each and every time I tee it up for him. That's Father Joe Grimaldi.
Well, thank you very much. I try, and I look forward to seeing you soon. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.